Hey everyone, another week in the books. We welcome you into our latest Trade to Black. I am your host, Shad Dales, and this is TDR's weekly recap of the biggest international developments in cannabis. Busy week it was. Today's podcast is presented by Prohibition Partners. They're the global authority on cannabis intelligence. If you're serious about understanding how regulation and markets are evolving worldwide, you need Prohibition Partners in your corner. If you want to learn more, visit prohibitionpartners.com. All right, let's get into our latest TDR Trade to Black podcast, our weekly recap of the biggest developments in the international side of the cannabis industry. Let's first begin this week in Germany. They published its first official review since legislation began back in April of 2024. The findings are cautiously encouraging. The legal market is slowly gaining ground. The illicit market, signs of decline. Importantly, there's been no clear increase in youth consumption or health emergencies tied to cannabis use, so that's promising. But regulators flag challenges. THC levels remain high, enforcement varies widely region to region, and cultivation clubs are struggling to scale. So the takeaway here, Germany's reforms, they are working, but the rollout remains uneven. So more to develop in Germany. But like I said, it is promising. Next up, let's now move to Spain, where medical cannabis could finally be approved in the coming weeks. This is big. The plan would allow oils and extracts for conditions like epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, chemotherapy side effects, and chronic pain. Prescriptions will come from specialist doctors, and patients will only be able to access medicine through hospital pharmacies. While it is progress, patient groups argue that rules are still too narrow, leaving many without meaningful access. So it looks like the medical narrative is picking up across the world. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Portugal, the PTMC 2025 conference made headlines. Experts agree Portugal's cannabis sector has hit an inflection point. Why? Well, there's regulatory delays, compliance scandals, and cultivation challenges have slowed growth. Regulators are pushing for greater transparency, professionalism, and innovation to restore trust. So Portugal's message, evolve or risk losing its leadership status in global cannabis. This country is one of the originals when it comes to cannabis. And speaking of originals, now a message from our good friends over at Morgan & Morgan. There's a reason investors get excited when a stock splits and suddenly feels twice as valuable. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Think about it. When you're investing, you want the right team in your corner. The same is true if you're injured and dealing with an insurance company. And that is where Morgan & Morgan comes into the equation. Why? Well, they got more than 1,000 attorneys and over 100 offices nationwide. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. And their track record, get this, it's hard to ignore. Here's what I mean by that. One example, in Florida, a client was offered just $350,000, but walked away with $12 million. That would help the portfolio. In Pennsylvania, another client turned $650,000 into a $26 million offer. That's a 40x return. One more Pennsylvania client got $29 million after the insurer offered only $500,000. And in Florida, get this, someone received $20 million when the last offer on the table was literally zero. Think about that. So in total, Morgan & Morgan has recovered more than $25 billion for over 500,000 clients. That's like compounding wins in your portfolio every single year. So when you hire them, it's like bringing in a legal army that has your back. Because if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And let's be honest, not all law firms are created equally. Choosing the wrong one can cost you just like choosing the wrong stock can. So with Morgan & Morgan, get this, their fee, it's free unless they win. You can start your claim right now by clicking the link in the description or by scanning this QR code on your screen with your phone. At the end of the day, if you want what you deserve, make sure you go in with the right team by contacting Morgan & Morgan today. Now, let's get back to the rest of our video. And staying in Europe, Brussels is preparing a new EU toolkit to guide member states in creating adult use cannabis frameworks. The goal is to reduce regulatory fragmentation across Europe while respecting national differences. It shows the EU is now recognizing that adult use reform is no longer hypothetical, and indeed it's happening, which again is good. All right, let's now shift across the ocean into Latin America. In Uruguay, the leader of the country's medical cannabis program admitted regulation came late, but laid out new strategies to expand patient access. The focus now is scaling production and ensuring safe, consistent supply. Over in Chile, thousands marched through Santiago for the annual Cultivate Your Rights demonstration administration. The protests mark 20 years of activism with calls for legalization, recognition of user rights, and an end to criminalization. That sounds familiar in a lot of different places. Now let's move over to Asia Pacific in Australia. With a key Therapeutic Goods Administration consultation deadline looming, patients are being urged to share their personal stories. Advocates fear without real patient voices, new rules could create more barriers instead of better access. Meanwhile, over in Thailand, Anutin Charnvirakul, the architect of the country's 2022 decriminalization, is now the prime minister. The cannabis industry sees his leadership as a chance to stabilize regulations and rebuild investor confidence, though resistance remains from those pushing for stricter controls. But there is change on the horizon, and this could be a good thing. Finally, let's move to Africa and the Middle East. In Morocco, the government has more than doubled land set aside for legal cannabis cultivation, growing from 616 hectares to now 1,347. Over 1,400 farmers are now participating, many producing the traditional Meldia strain. The big question now remains, can profitability and regulation keep pace with expansion? In Lebanon, a national cannabis strategy is now on the way. The plan would regulate cultivation, processing, and export with hopes of boosting economic growth while keeping diversion out of the illicit market, which again is good. So to quickly recap, from Germany's reform progress to Spain's long-awaited medical program to Morocco's expansion, it's clear global cannabis is moving forward, but let's face it, unevenly. So this is this week's International Recap presented by Prohibition Partners, delivering global cannabis intelligence you can trust. As usual, if you like this breakdown, give us your feedback and leave your comments below. Make sure to give it a like, smash on that bell for all notifications, and make sure to subscribe to us here at the TDR Trade to Black podcast. That's it for this week's international news. Once again, I'm your host, Shad Dales, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.